Hi, my name is Kelli Warble, and I am honored to be able to speak with you today. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how I started as a physics and math teacher, but sort of transitioned into thinking about continuing as a physics and math teacher, but thinking about how all of us as teachers can advocate for policies that are supportive of STEM education for all of our students. So I'm going to try to give you a little bit of background from my own history and my own identity as really a STEM educator first, and how I sort of fell into being an advocate and getting involved with some advocacy efforts. Some of them more dramatic at the state level, but then some of them just sort of more local, which may have more impact on our students. And then I'm going to try to give a little bit of advice and takeaways for what the typical physics or physical science teacher, K through 12 educator can do to sort of help advocate for and support everyone as far as STEM education goes. So my story is really, as an educator, is really been affected by a couple of early experiences for me. My first teaching experience was at an after-school program at a community center in Central Phoenix, where most of my students were Spanish monolingual students. They came to the program after school because they didn't necessarily have someplace at home to go and study. And it was kind of an interesting program where we would pick the students up from school and then we would drive them home every night. So I really got to see where they lived and what their experiences were like. And I got to run the science and math activities, and everything was sort of really hands-on and tried to engage the students there. And that motivated me to go back to school. I had already gotten a degree in mathematics and with a minor in physics and engineering. And I decided to go back to school to get certified to become a teacher because of my experiences at that community center. And one of my earliest communities of support as a teacher was the modeling instruction program at Arizona State University, which supports physics educators and physics pedagogy. And then I also got an opportunity early as an educator to participate in Eisenhower professional development, supported by Eisenhower, what they called Eisenhower funds. And I got to work with a lot of math teachers on that at that time. And so all of those really supported me as an early educator. So my early identity really was all about what does STEM education look like and how can I focus on STEM teaching and learning and engage my students. When I started out my career, I was at a Union High School, which is a really rural farming community, and I was teaching everywhere from pre-algebra up to calculus and then also physics, and I had a lot of English language learners in my courses, a lot of kids who worked in the local cotton farms. And I was just fascinated by STEM teaching and learning and how I could have my students learn more. I transferred over to Dysart Unified District, which is a really more central city, low socioeconomic district. It had been the projects around the school 20 years before. And it was really experiencing this explosive suburban growth. And then the Great Recession hit, and we were sort of overcrowded. I was starting to question a lot about the inequities in STEM education, but still really focused on STEM education. Didn't think of myself as a policy person. I then got the privilege to work at a place called Arizona School for the Arts, which really, really empowered teachers to be advocates for their students, to help have team level meetings so we could really talk about our students and what they needed and create the needs out of that and change our grading policies and practices to really meet the needs of our students. And I was starting to feel more empowered as part of an advocate for policies that might help our kids. And in 2012, I became physics teacher in residence at Arizona State University. And I got the first time opportunity to go to more national conferences and hear what physics educators and university professors were saying. Like I met someone who had been working on the next generation science standards as one of the authors. And I realized that they had kind of a disconnect from what classroom teachers were experiencing and weren't always relying on classroom teacher voices when making things such as next generation science standards, and that perhaps they could really benefit by hearing the teacher voice a little more. I was surprised actually by it. So that kind of was the precursor for me falling into policy advocacy, which I never would have thought of myself as being concerned about big picture policies. I was so focused on being an educator. But I did get to work with a task force that wrote an Aspiring to Lead report for the American Association of Physics Teachers in fall of 2016, which is when I fell into policy. And the task force members that I got to work with were really inspiring. And one of them, Mike, he had shared his experience as an elementary science course chair in the DC area. And some of the things he shared kind of shocked all of us. He noted that he was given 45 minutes a week of class time for all the teachers in his district to teach science. So they were only teaching 45 minutes a week of science. And he noted that the average in elementary school grades was just 20 minutes a day. And you can all imagine what had also been happening in fall of 2016. The election had just finished for the presidential election. And all of us were concerned about fact-based reasoning and evidence and how to make our students into critical thinkers. And Mike noted that he felt as if the lack of science in elementary school sort of aligned with our national increasing inability to separate fact from fiction. And he felt as if the best way to get that started in us as a nation was to sort of have science in elementary school and emphasize evidence-based decision making. He felt like that was a call to action. And even more now, I was thinking, teachers have a lot to say about policy, and maybe we should be more involved. So I was really inspired by this task force a lot. And the task force itself split into sort of 3 teams, and we were focusing on how teachers could be leaders in different areas. And we had a team for instructional leadership, which was probably where I would have placed myself before, because I was really interested in STEM teaching and learning and how to make my instruction better. And then a broader association leadership, like what are you doing with local science associations? How are you networking with teachers in your area or even nationally? And then we had a 3rd team that was policy leadership, which most of us in the room did not consider ourselves as policy leaders. I decided to join that policy leadership team, which was only 3 of us, and the other teams, had 5 or 8 people on their team. And I had really been motivated because a teacher that I knew in Arizona, Mike Vargas, had recently been actually even going to the Arizona legislature to get funding for STEM educators. And he had been so successful and motivational that I thought, I'm going to try it. I'm going to look into policy leadership and see what I can find out. And I was really, really inspired by the final report of Aspiring to Lead, because it really did, the subtitle says, it's going to center on K through 12 teachers and make them agents of change in US physical science education. And I especially loved that it put K through 12 teachers, not just high school teachers who we normally think of as physics teachers, because we really need to be sort of have a unified message, I think, and that all of the educators, their voices should be heard. And one quote that was put up in the report really inspired me also, which basically says, you know, if we're making policies for education, we need expert teachers as part of the development and the implementation, because otherwise you're going to get a lot of unintended consequences, and your outcomes might not be what you meant. And this was looking back on things such as No Child Left Behind and the whole accountability and testing movement that had some crazy unintended consequences. Some of those teachers probably were trying to make a call to action around, but we hadn't been empowered to do so. So I did want to give you a little overview of what had been happening in Arizona that had really inspired and motivated me. And that started with this group of teachers and educators in Arizona that are amazing people. They had noticed a real decline in enrollment in physics in Arizona. The man on the far left here, Larry Dukrich, he had retired recently, and the high school where he retired from had gone from 13 sections of physics down to only 2 sections of physics within 5 years of his retiring, and he was very concerned. And they started trying to figure out what was happening, and they interviewed guidance counselors and figured out that a lot of students decided to take physics or not take physics based on what counselors were saying. And they found that 70% of counselors were sort of steering students away from physics because they thought students lacked the math skills to succeed in it. And so they would steer them into other science courses. Only 40% of the students were worried about math skills, but the counselors were steering them away. And meanwhile, after the Great Recession, Arizona per pupil funding had decreased by over 35% and hadn't caught up to local standards in about 2016. And Arizona was the worst in the nation as far as per pupil funding drop. And then we meanwhile had a bunch of high school physics teachers leaving the field, and we only had about 160 teachers left. And this was all based on research done by Mike and Jane Jackson. Mike Vargas is the second from the left in this photo. And so they went to the legislature and repeatedly and finally got them to consider, the Arizona legislature, to pass a bill to give scholarships for teachers. They ended up with $300,000 worth of scholarships in the first round. And it was due to their dedication. And I was very motivated by this and thought it was just amazing. So I went more to focus on policy and decided to start working on a master's degree, since I was at Arizona State anyway and got very low tuition. So I decided to start working on master's in science and technology policy. I actually intentionally looked for a master's outside of the Teachers College at my institution because I wanted to try to network with other possible people who had policy experience. And they tasked me with getting an internship for this policy master's degree. And I ended up getting an internship with the American Association of Physics Teachers, and I was really lucky. At the time, they were just launching the Step Up program to motivate more women to study physics. So I got to be a consultant for that program. And then we actually got to develop a whole policy fellowship for teachers that we had that went on for 2 summers. And basically the idea behind this policy fellowship for teachers was that most of the policy work in education actually goes on at the state level, because the majority of your education funding is state funding. However, teachers weren't necessarily feeling empowered to be advocates at the state level for policy programs, and were a little intimidated. So we felt if we brought these teachers to Washington, D.C., to sort of do the rounds on Capitol Hill, to make appointments to meet with their own senators and representatives, and to meet with different associations around the DC area that worked on education policy, that they would feel more empowered and educated, and they wouldn't be so nervous going back to their own home states and being advocates for policies in their own home states, which is where it really, really matters. So this fellowship, the funding was secured by then AAPT program officer Rebecca Vieira, who's an amazing person to work with. And our first cohort of fellows is pictured here. So it was 12 teachers. And so I'm going to give you an idea of what we were working on. The Arizona team was really large because it was a team who wanted to go help the other efforts spearheaded by Mike Vargas. So we were working on the state physics teachers shortage, and Amanda Whitehurst, a third grade teacher who was part of our team, kind of referred to us as the Cactus Caucus. So that's the name that stuck with our little group. We also had some teachers who were really interested in working on diversity in physics, one from Illinois and one from California, John and Brian. So they were actually cooperating a lot with the Step Up program, it turns out, and were advocating for more diversity in their classes. Matt and Andrew from Kansas were really interested in integrating engineering and physics education and mechanisms for doing that in their home state. And there was a team from South Dakota who were actually elementary science educators, and they were really concerned about equitable access to science education in their state. And then there was a team from New York who were concerned with teacher retention in New York State, so very similar to Arizona. So these were the teachers that came to the Policy Fellowship the first summer and went back to their home states to work on their fellowship. Our Cactus Caucus, after the first summer, did go back to our state and advocate, and had a really dramatic advocacy success as far as getting even more scholarships for teachers, with the hope that we could get more teachers to become highly qualified physics teachers in our state by taking classes and being supported for those university classes to get more professional development in physics. So what we were worried about is that the $300,000 was almost gone completely, and the initial policy that Mike Vargas and his team had gotten passed, no money had been allocated to the Department of Ed to administer the funds. So they were just trying to give out the funds as quick as they could, because they didn't have overhead to advertise or do anything for the program. So the funds were exhausted quickly, and they went out without much marketing or advertising. So we really wanted more funding. So we actually convinced the legislators to introduce a new bill, Senate Bill 1051, to renew the program and expand the program. And our team of teachers went to almost every committee meeting that as the bill went through the Congress. And we were unanimously approved in each committee. They were so excited to hear from teachers. And not only did they give us our ask, they doubled the funding in one of the committees on the bill. And they also set aside 3% of the monies for the Department of Ed to administer it. I think we succeeded because we really had a strong coalition that we had built, and the relationships we had built as a part of the Policy Fellowship. And we really, as part of the Policy Fellowship, learned how to tie our message to what the Arizona state was concerned about, which is a strong STEM economy. So we really framed our message of, we want these funds for teachers to make our students more educated in STEM and prepare our economy for STEM. And we really did have a lot of serendipity as a result of this networking and policy fellowship to meet with legislators and take action. And this whole experience actually made me realize and reflect back on times when I, as a teacher, had been advocating for policies and not really realized it. And I want to emphasize, I do think that in some cases, policies at the local level are actually much more impactful on students than trying to go through this whole big state legislature kind of action. So don't think of policy as just being sort of this legislative policy that gets passed. So one of the things that I realized I had a question about way back in 1998, my department was pushing me to have AP Physics and Calculus and get certified for the AP program. But we already had a dual enrollment with the community college for both my physics class and my calculus class. And as part of the dual enrollment, some of the funding actually came back to my classroom to purchase supplies. And switching over to AP, which at the time wasn't the best program and wasn't universally accepted for college credit because it wasn't necessarily accepted as a lab credit, it wasn't the best for my students. And so I actually successfully advocated to just stay as dual enrollment, which didn't sound as kind of sexy to parents, but was actually better for my students, I think. So I had a success then. In 2001, when my school was being rebuilt, I was able to meet with the architects to give them a whole floor plan for how I wanted my physics classroom to look. And I realized this was really advocating for a policy on how the classroom layout would be. I wanted movable lab stations. I wanted places where I could have circle whiteboard meetings. I did not want sinks because the water got all over my electronic probes. I was an abject failure on that. And I think it's because I went in alone. We didn't go in as a science department team and say, this is what we need. In the end, we had fixed lab stations with water, no flexible floor plans. It was not good. And in 2008, I had questioned my district in Dysart at that time about their testing policies. They decided that we had this high stakes testing movement and we needed to prepare our kids. And they started giving tests, high stakes tests that were district level every quarter to my Algebra 2 students and Algebra 1 students. And the tests were poorly designed and really long, and we ended up just taking a lot of time out of class without really preparing our students for anything. I questioned it, but I was a failure in making any changes. And again, I think it's because I worked alone and I didn't really have solutions at the time. So I realized that I had really been advocating for policies, but maybe not doing the best job at it. So looking back on how I had advocated alone and not been successful, and how the team of teachers had been more successful together, I do have some advice. And one of them is that we really are policy makers and policy deciders and policy influencers all the time as classroom teachers. And we shouldn't be scared and shy away from that. And we shouldn't conflate policy and politics. None of us want to be political in our classes, but we should advocate for STEM education that's going to empower our students. The other thing is that teamwork is so key. Having a coalition of people who are all working towards the same goal and can give a different lens on why we want it is really powerful. And so working together as a team is really great. And then as other team members hear about initiatives that are coming up, you can be really strategic and talk to each other as partners. And then when public meetings come up, you can say, oh, hey, Melissa, I know you have this issue in your classroom. Can you speak at this public meeting so that we can give a snapshot of what this policy will look like there? And then another thing is to have solutions that are ready for some of the major challenges that are coming up. So if you know, like right now, I know that equity, diversity, and inclusion is going to be coming up as a huge issue as a result of the pandemic learning. So I could immediately say to administrators, hey, look, there's these great lessons from Step Up. We can start implementing these lessons now. And here's the underrepresentation curriculum. Maybe we can do that. And here's how we can do it wider. And here's what we can do. So if you're prepared with solutions before these big issues come up, you can then, when the policy window opens, you can say, look, we already have this idea ready to go. Why don't you help us get this implemented? And then if I was going to just give a little advice to the physics and physical science teachers in this network about what you can do, one of the things one of my policy fellows emphasized was just show up. Sometimes just showing up for each other to different locations can support these policies and one another and have really great results. So consider joining local associations of teachers, consider helping network with your middle school teachers to train them in something like CASEL lessons. Seek out cohort-based PDs so that you're part of networks. And then even just check in with your students about their stress during remote learning if you're in that kind of situation. And use lessons that are available to you from Step Up and the Underrepresentation Curriculum Project. Another thing is really try to amplify your voice and the voice of those pushing for high quality STEM education for students. Talk to your guidance counselors and the prerequisite course teachers to ensure that you're getting a diverse population of students encouraged to take challenging STEM courses, and use the message where you're empowering students and you're saying not all student has to be a STEM major, but we want them to be empowered to seek any degree they want once they get to the university. So perhaps we should challenge them to take very challenging STEM courses as high school students. Even consider having students present at board meetings. I had my students bring motion sensors to a board meeting once way back when I was in Buckeye to show why I wanted this equipment. And then don't be afraid to question the status quo. I think sometimes we go along with things like everybody needs to take AP classes, and AP is fine, but if all of the resources for the test are going to the college board instead of staying local, maybe we should question that. Maybe we should question advising structures or bell schedules or things like that. So don't just take everything for granted and question some of these issues. And I think finally, I want to end with a quote from my friend Amanda Whitehurst, who she was a third grade teacher who joined our policy team in Arizona and really increased her confidence in being a STEM teaching advocate. And she really wanted to say, really as teachers, we're already equipped with the things that we need in order to affect change. And we are used to building coalitions as teachers, and we can all work towards goals that will empower our teachers and empower our students to be more prepared for the STEM economy. So thank you very much. And I just wanted to also end with the fact that we will have a follow-up Q&A session for this talk, and it's going to occur on April 3rd. And I am definitely going to be joined by some of the Arizona Policy Fellows, and there might be a few more joining us. I haven't necessarily gotten their commitment yet, but Amanda Whitehurst, who's now president of STEMteachersPHX, Mike Vargas, who really was the instigator of most of this, who is now working as an Einstein Fellow in DC this year, and Melissa Girmscheid, who's a physics first and a computational modeling and physics teacher at West Point High School in Tolleson. So they will be joining me for sure, and I hope you can join us for Q&A and talk to some of my fellow policy advocates. Thank you very much.
Okay, so since we have such a hot topic today for you, I suggest that we, as people are still signing on, we just get started. First of all, I want to introduce Kelli Warble, who is a physics teacher in residence at Arizona State University, and who is a relentless advocate for teachers as policymakers. I got so excited watching your talk, Kelli. I can't wait to discuss some of the points in greater detail. And as a special bonus, Kelli is not only here herself today, she's brought with her 5 panelists, Amanda Whitehurst, who is a STEM teacher in Phoenix, Mike Vargas, who is the Albert Einstein Distinguished Educator Fellow at the DoD in Washington, but who is also teaching physics in Arizona, Melissa Girmscheid from West Point High School, Nicole Spencer from Phoenix College, and Jeff Hengesbach from Estrella Mountain Community College. Thank you all so much for joining us. I don't know about you, but I really got fired up, especially when I heard Kelli say K-12 teachers as agents of change in physics education. I just love it. And, you know, I think typically as educator, we don't think of ourselves as agents of change. And in general, I think this is true for the physics community, not only in K-12, but in higher education and academia just as much. We've done a very poor job advocating for our own discipline. So I'm looking forward to learning a lot from you during this discussion here. So I want to very briefly encourage you, first of all, to use the chat, since we have 5 panelists in addition to Kelli. There should be at least 1 or 2 of them to answer the questions in the chat. So we'll have a parallel discussion going on here. And if you want to ask a question by speaking, what I would suggest you do is you raise your hand, and you can start doing that now to get in line. So to access that, you click on the reactions button at the bottom. And as you click on the reactions button, you'll see a couple of icons. And at the bottom, there should be a broad button that says raise hand. And if you raise your hand, you'll get into a queue that I can see, and I'll call upon you when it's time. So please do that. So Kelli, you had a marvelous quote from Amanda at the end of your talk. We need to make sure that we are networking. And this here, the PoLS-T network, is a network. It's a beginning network that is just starting to sort of help draw the attention to the problems that we have actually worldwide into justifying our discipline, which is so important given that all our devices depend on advances in our discipline. But we all know here, sitting in this Zoom room, when we go to a party and we say we're a physicist, people, cringe. Oh, physics! I had such a problem with physics, and I mean, I say to some degree that might be true for math too, but it's certainly very acute for people like us in physics. So the question I have is, how could a network like this best help? What could we do here? What could the members of this network, the people who are here in the audience, do to follow in your footstep and advocate for what we do and be agents of change?
That's an excellent question, Eric, and I appreciate you asking it. And I think one of the things I would like to emphasize is I guess it's kind of an old quote that I don't know who to attribute to, but that all politics is local. in a way, all policies are local for education. So I think the team that I have here of Arizona Fellows are extremely impressive because we did go to, or they did go to the legislature. I feel like I helped very little with that and get scholarships for STEM teachers. But I think that starting with your local school and trying to advocate for your students in your local school is a great idea. One of the things we found out was in the state of Arizona was that students stopped taking physics, especially if their guidance counselors were not directing them or encouraging them to do so. We sometimes found instances of guidance counselors who filtered students out of our physics courses because of their perception of the students being able to do well in physics. And so just contacting your guidance counselors in your school and ensuring that they know students are welcome in your physics class, that's one way to start. And networking with your fellow teachers on things such as if you're worried about a new building that's being built. I went in and advocated for a floor plan that would be conducive to good physics pedagogy myself. And of course, none of that happened when the architects built the building. They made all the science classrooms identical and almost not functional. If I had perhaps gotten together with my science teachers and gone to the architects together as a block and said, this is what we need in science. This is why we want movable furniture so we can make a circle board meeting. These are the pedagogical reasons for that. Perhaps I would have been more successful and they would have listened. So definitely use the people around you and be sure to sort of ramp up whatever their agenda or what they're worried about themselves. I think that's a good place to start.
You mentioned guidance counselors also in your talk, and I cringed when I saw the statistics and also when I saw the quote of, guidance counselor thinking that students did not have the requisite math skills. I mean, physics is not math. Physics is concepts and ideas, and math is a shortcut sometimes to describe that. But Faraday, as I wrote in one of my comments in your talk, did sort of Nobel Prize quality work without ever having a formal education and knowing nothing about math. For the Feynman lectures, it's mostly text, not math. So that's a huge misconception. So my question is, are guidance counselors the key to change? I mean, are they one of the barriers that we have? Should the AAPT or policymakers or whatever do something to change guidance counselors' attitude towards physics? In fact, Matt here in the text says, thank you for the reminder to talk to guidance counselors. But is there something we as a network could do to unseat that misconception about physics?
That might be a start. I know we call ourselves the Cactus Caucus because we're from Arizona, and we had, for part of our policy fellowship, that became our nickname. But the Cactus Caucus members have been throwing around the idea of trying to speak to the state level guidance counselors. They have certain conferences themselves, just like all other groups would do. We haven't been successful getting on to their conference speaker list because at the teacher level, there might not be much that you can do. They might not take you seriously, unfortunately. So that might be a place to look. I don't think that it's just the guidance counselors, though. It's also, in certain cases, administrators. I think we've run into the experience of administrators not being aware that physics is a STEM course. Because, I think they know it abstractly. The administrators and the public and policymakers know it abstractly. But when they say they're pushing for STEM, I don't think the understanding is there that it starts with the fundamental sciences such as physics, chemistry, and there's no P in the STEM. So I have encountered policymakers who wanted to have more engineers and did not realize that physics was fundamental to engineering. So we run into places where they are canceling physics courses because they can't get instructors, and then replacing it with something like biology courses, which is, there's nothing wrong with biology, but biology isn't necessary ultimately for all physics or for all engineering, unless you're in bioengineering or something. There is not the realization that physics is absolutely a foundational course that you cannot get into many of these professions without. That perception or realization just, I don't think, is there.
Well, I think that's a very important point. So I see we have one hand up. I want to give a shout out. Bob Hilborn is joining us. That's such a pleasure, Bob, to see your name. I don't see your video, so I'm assuming that the name is the Bob that I know. But thank you for joining us. So Theresa Rainey has her hand up. Please introduce yourself briefly, and everybody else, please raise your hand to get in line for a question. Theresa.
Hi, I'm Theresa Rainey. I'm currently working in Montgomery County, Maryland. It's the largest district in Maryland, and it's actually, I teach in the most diverse school. And I have really kind of a concern that I think is going to turn into a self-fulfilling prophecy, is that when NGSS rolled around, there was a big thing of integrating earth science into the science courses. And two of the larger districts in Maryland are now piloting, and they've actually rolled them out, physics courses. One is called the Physics of Earth and Space in the county north of where I work. And then ours is rolling out astronomy with physics. However, what's happening is that the people that can teach them don't have to be physics people. They need to be earth science people because of the credential problem. And then when I look at the standards and kind of what they're teaching, boy, we're missing a lot of stuff. And I feel like that this is something that I think might start rolling out elsewhere as well. And I'm just really worried about that because they're much more of a reading course and not necessarily the fun labs, because there aren't people that may be as comfortable teaching it. And we have that pipeline problem again. I didn't know what you were seeing where you were, or if this is a trend that other states are seeing. So, I mean,
you know,
it's a
I
bit
would
worrying.
almost, I think you have a legitimate concern, and I think I might want some of our panelists to maybe see what they're seeing. I don't know, maybe Melissa or Mike might have some comments on that.
Yeah, so we have, hi everyone, I'm Melissa Girmscheid. I am a current high school teacher teaching physics, and we had the same concern within my district because there was this push to kind of integrate that earth science and the astronomy standards into the physics course. And yeah, I mean, I said to my district, I don't feel comfortable teaching those standards because that's not my area of expertise. And that really is going to be an issue that we're going to see nationwide. So that it's great to see this network, because this is one area where we can band together. We really can band together. We need to start from a local level of going to our school administration and our district administration and expressing why this is a difficulty. I didn't take chemistry in college. I didn't take I took a physical geography 100. So in no way prepares me to teach an earth science course or standards within my physics course. So this is an area where we really need to speak up, and we need to express why exactly this isn't what's best for students. There has to be a better solution. And that's where when we go to speak up, it needs to be with a solution in mind, not just that we won't do it, but that there needs to be a solution. So for example, when we went to our district and said, this is not going to work for us, we cannot integrate all the earth science standards within physics, we came back with a solution. So my students right now are in the middle of an astronomy unit where we started with universal law of gravitation and then built it into, now they've been exploring Kepler's laws. They're freshmen, so it's a very conceptual approach to this. But having that solution made it really easy for them to say yes. So rather than going with just the problem in mind, going with a solution. But if we all did this, network wide, we could make that change happen.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Theresa, for that great question. I see lots of hands going up. I love that. That's great. Robert Crickle.
Hi, so I'm Rob. I'm from New York, and I share a lot of the concerns that were just brought up. Now, I should say I come from a pretty well-off school that has multiple physics courses for kind of every level. So we have conceptual physics for students without math all the way up to AP Physics C. So I think that one of the biggest things that I see is the monetary cost to get everything started. And I couldn't agree more that everything was kind of a local level problem. But one of the things that I see, especially with NGSS and these concerns, is the integration of stuff into physics or physics into stuff, as opposed to kind of an overhauling of all science, as it were, which has been a universal problem nationally for as long as we've been teaching physics. And I was just wondering your thoughts, and I guess everybody's thoughts on the panel with regards to that. For the steps, past that local level where we can really start to tackle, I guess, the nation's pipeline as opposed to just our local pipeline, especially where location really does play a big factor, at least in access and persistence within physics and especially STEM.
Thank you so much for your question, Robert. I think that if we're talking about the national pipeline, I probably would want to call on Mike Vargas, who's currently a physics teacher from Arizona, who's currently an Einstein Fellow at the Department of Defense. So Mike, do you have anything that you can tell Robert?
Well, I can tell you that there's a big push for, transdisciplinary learning. The cool thing about being an Einstein Fellow is that you get to be on all these like really crazy committees that you never even heard of before. And so I'm on an OSTP committee, for the Office of it's Office of Science and Technology Policy. But they actually have a committee formed like on how to do transdisciplinary learning right now. Like they're actively looking at, how do we cross-pollinate disciplines and get out of our silos? Because that's like the big thing that they're all talking about right now is how do we get out of the, chemistry, biology, like everything's very siloed. How do we merge things together, right? And I think we've all heard of, the computational like modeling physics, like, bringing computers into the physics class. That's starting to pop up. So these discussions are happening right now with the goal of like making changes in the next 5 to 10 years, which is really interesting, which I didn't know about before this past year. So I think one thing that I think we should all expect is that those things are going to start coming down the pipe. Like how do we merge? How do we merge one class with another? How do we put more systems into what we're talking about? Things like that. But to get back to your, to get back to the overall question of, how to, just to reiterate what Melissa was talking about. I mean, you are seeing a lot of places where, new leader like so I'll tell you about my district. So we led the way in physics first for 20 years, right? It's like we were on magazine covers and people quoted us and we were doing great stuff. And then, all of a sudden, one year, all the principals got wiped out for whatever reason, and new leadership came in, and they said, nope, physics is too hard. It is too hard of a course. We're going to go to bio because bio brings kids joy. That was a quote. And you just had to sit there and like, are you kidding me? Like we have more physics teachers here than anywhere in the state, and you're going to just get rid of that? And it's because they just don't understand. And the real tragedy was that our physics folks did not get together. They did not band together. They did not, put their foot down and say, hey, look, this is the wrong move. They did not do that. And so my big thing is, you're stronger in numbers. The Cactus Caucus, our group formed, because we realized that, and we got a lot of stuff done because we came in as a group and said, all of us physics teachers think this is the right way. And when you have the ability to bring people together as a group, whether you're talking on a district level, regional level, statewide level, like, it makes a huge difference. It makes a huge, huge difference. But, if you think about who your typical physics teachers are, we normally just don't do that. We don't, because we're very, we're physics guys, and, I live in my room and I'm usually the only person in the building and I don't talk to anybody else. So I think what I love about this group is just the possibilities of what this could be, because there's so much possibility with a group that's organized and has a has a set goal mission. So over.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Robert. Let's see, we had a couple more hands up. Clay Stanfield.
Hi, thanks for being here today and talking about this. The group I work with at A&M Commerce is concerned about teacher training. And so a lot of these issues, I think, especially hearing what was just said about trying to cross-pollinate disciplines, is kind of terrifying, because if we don't know about that, we can't adapt the classes that we give our students so that they can be effective teachers in these areas, and kind of alleviate what Melissa was saying as well about not feeling expert enough in those standards to be able to teach effectively. And so that's kind of my quandary and question is, the network we're trying to make in Texas is going to try to focus on identifying these administrator conferences, high school administrator conferences, that we can get into and tell them, hey, you need to hire people who know physics to teach physics. Because what we have is administrators wanting flexibility in their schedules, so they'll hire a composite certified teacher who took mostly physics classes, but because they got that certification, could now be thrust into biology or environmental science. And it's not doing the physics teacher any good, and it's not doing those students any good. And so we think the area to target is administrators, and letting them know that this is an issue. But until the state and the people with the purse strings acknowledge this, they're going to do what they can to put teachers in the classrooms to keep students in their seats and learning maybe not as effectively as they could. So I'm just wondering if that is the right approach. I guess it is aiming at administrators at this point.
Thank you very much for your question. And I want to say, I think I saw a presentation on your master's program for physics teachers at the PhysTech conference, and it looks amazing. So everybody on the call, check that master's program out. I want to take some of your classes. I don't know if focusing on administrators directly is the full solution. And I am kind of wondering if one of our panelists who used to be a high school principal, Jeff Hengesbach, would have anything to say about that. Jeff, would you like to address what Clay was asking?
Clay, yeah. Well, I posted this. That's the challenge. Is this is such a multi-headed beast that we're fighting, right? There's so many components. Having been a principal for a few years and then turned back from the dark side and gone back into teaching in a way, the challenges that the administrations feel are real. The fortitude with which they combat the daily challenges, that's a different issue. The level or competence of the leadership that they provide and their willingness to stand up for what is right or what is better, I guess, is usually the case, right? Shades of gray that they have to face. In Arizona, especially, to get a warm body as a teacher in the classroom who can stay for more than, what's the average 3 years? A new teacher may stay for a few years and then move on to be a barista at Starbucks, so on and so forth. But it is challenged. Now, I think the administrations have to be a part of it. Certainly, again, the multifaceted in the state of Arizona, new state standards and the testing for those state standards help adjust or shift the view of the administrations, because that's a tangible number that's assigned, a grade assigned to their class that they, their benefits and hinge upon, their vocation, their continued vocation hinge on from their specific boards. So there, some input into that at the state level certainly could help influence them. That is the administrations, the counseling team, again, as Kelli and Mike, we talked about, help influence the parents who absolutely can influence if the parent group can make a push for advocacy. There's some districts here in Arizona where the parent group, partially affluent but just partially politically savvy, who advocate very strongly for specific courses. And my gosh, they have their kids have access to whatever physics courses that they desire, really. I guess that seems kind of doom and gloomy thing, but I just wanted to mention we have a voice, and we're the experts. They don't know. We can speak with authority, and if we do speak with authority and confidence at whatever level, and especially collectively, our voices have weight. In our Cactus Caucus journey, when we had opportunity to sit with state legislators, we could speak with an authority, and they listened. They were sometimes shocked or uncertain, but them hearing from us gave them. I mean, again, you're always feeding the egos or the agendas of others, but in us sharing information with the legislators or our own administrators, based upon as scientists, facts, right? Here's the data, here's the information we have that we can give you. We serve them as we're serving our own desire to move things forward, but we are serving them and providing them a resource that they wouldn't otherwise have, which strengthens their ability to make sound decisions. And so I mean, there's a positive, right? All this clamor of difficulty that we're facing. The positive is that we, individually and certainly collectively, have a voice that others can't ignore, right? If we have the voice that's out there. So that's, I guess, I don't know if I specifically could answer that question about any key administrator, but we certainly have the capability to at least influence, hopefully positively, that discussion or debate, and shift it into an arena that is now reliant upon, detailed, factual, specific information, and we can guide the narrative, maybe, depending on what changes are occurring.
Thank you, Jeff and Clay. I did want to say a few more things, probably pertinent to Texas. You are probably aware of Michael Martyr and the UTeach program out of UT Austin. And Michael Martyr, I know I heard him speak maybe 5 years ago about how he was working to get the requirements changed in high school, and physics was actually required for a couple of years there, I think, in the state of Texas. And then they took the requirement out, and Michael Martyr said he stopped having that battle. He just wanted to have kids get up to Algebra 2. But he certainly might be an ally for you in the state of Texas. The other thing I would like to mention, after my experience at Arizona State as teacher in residence, I think one of my biggest frustrations at Arizona State is this how siloed the physics department has become or is. And when I went there, I said, I would love to work with pre-service math teachers, pre-service chemistry teachers as well, because a lot of us who are in physics teach those content areas also, and the departments tend to not talk to one another. And I've discovered since getting to Arizona State that we have some great discipline-based education researchers in the biology department who are doing education research into biology and in chemistry, but we're not leveraging and working together in our programs to help teachers. So certainly maybe look at your own university and see, do you have education research experts in those other content areas who would be willing to come and teach some of those methods of teaching courses, or some of the, I love some of your courses like quantum physics for teachers. Maybe there's a biophysics for teachers or something that you can do that is interdisciplinary to help prepare the teachers in your program.
And I wanted,
yeah, go ahead. There's somebody else who spoke up there.
this is Amanda, and I just wanted to comment really quickly that this is a major problem, like the preparation of our teachers coming into the workforce. It's the reason why STEM Teachers Phoenix in Phoenix exists, is we're a group of teachers that decided we did not feel prepared to meet the challenges of what was happening in our classroom. And so we try to mine the experiences of the people around us to provide professional development for our colleagues. And so, this has been a major frustration for us. We were just speaking about it last night, that, there is, at Arizona State, they now have an elementary certificate. Is that true, Kelly? That is supposed to be a STEM certificate, and it's a math class, a math class, a math class, and a math class, and now you have a STEM certificate. And so, that's not this integration that they're talking about. This is not, but we're telling teachers, you're going to be prepared to teach STEM after you get our STEM certificate. So this is a major problem, and I'm really glad that you're thinking about it and that you're specifically trying to address this issue, because it is a major issue.
Thank you, Amanda, and thank you, Clay, for that excellent question. I see here one more hand up. Matthew Reicher.
Hi. So part of what I just recently got an email. I'm in New Jersey, and it was inviting New Jersey teachers to join a committee to help develop the curriculum. I clicked through and looked at it a little bit. It was very much like what we were talking about. It had the environmental science and earth standards as the underpinnings of it, and I was considering getting involved in it. It sounded like it was important, and when I saw that, I kind of cringed to begin with. And I'm a very new teacher. This is my third year teaching. I did career change in the middle of things, so I'm really here gathering tons of information and opinions. It seems like people aren't too thrilled with that course structure to begin with, although we're trying to work around it. I'm just wondering, from this group, at first I thought, okay, when I saw that, I'm not even going to bother. Then maybe I should be involved to say, hey, is this really what you want to be doing? So I would just be curious to hear what people would think is valuable in that regard. Thanks.
So let me clarify, are you asking specifically about how earth and space science should be integrated with physics?
I'm not sure. In my school, we don't integrate earth and space science, although I was one of those people hired with a physics certificate, and they said, well, when we hire you, you need to also take the practice for general science, and I wound up also teaching environmental science, even though I'm a mechanical engineer as my background. So I guess my question is, do we feel this is a valuable thing, or is this something that has been put upon us? And do we feel we should be advocating for or against it, or with some adaptation in the middle there? That's really my question. Is it something we should be fighting against tooth and nail, or just going, well, okay, I guess this is the way the wind's blowing, we got to deal with it?
Jeff, did you have a comment?
Yeah,
on
I did,
that?
Matthew. So, hey, Jeff here. Not knowing the specifics of the curricular change, what I could suggest to you is for you specifically, you Matthew, to get involved is critical, or really important. You led with I'm a new teacher, but honestly, Matthew, if you were here in Arizona in some context, you may have a stronger voice than a veteran teacher in that political arena because of your background as a former engineer, and in fact, you would be bringing in a perspective and able to talk about things at it in a different way, a deeper, different slant, different viewpoint, whatever, because of your background. So I would encourage you, absolutely get involved, and then work as your conscience suggests. If the change, sometimes changes are reasonable and make sense, but that as you're negotiating, right? The body politic is a body of negotiation. Your little influences can move. Early influences can change the direction greatly by the time the trajectory is done, as you know. So, but I would encourage you just to get involved.
And I would agree with that, and say that every challenge is also an opportunity. And I actually would like to say, about 5 years or 10 years ago, I was on a committee or actually a team that developed some middle school modeling workshops for middle school science teachers. And one of the challenges there was that from the middle school level, most of the sciences are integrated. And we worked together to really come up with different compelling storylines of how you could start with sort of like the particle models of matter and chemistry and basic molecular theory, and look at how that happened, and then spread that into maybe your next unit is on the weather in middle school, and all the weather patterns and weather changes have to do with different densities and temperatures and things like that of how the air flows. So the chemistry content is fundamental to the weather patterns that we were trying to do, and we tried to weave a storyline that could go in different sequences to these different content areas. So I would say there is a lot of fundamental physics and chemistry concepts in Earth and space science. Earth and space science is just the more complex version of the model. So taking that as an opportunity and trying to integrate that, and honoring the voices of those who think the Earth and space science is incredibly important, and integrating that as well. I don't know that it's necessarily good to be completely against that just because we want to have science, right, in our schools. So advocating for all of it.
Earlier in the chat, there was a discussion of, how in, thank you so much, Matthew and Jeff. There was a discussion about how in many other countries, certainly true for me, having been educated in Europe, there's not this, first this discipline, then next one, and then, find biology, then chemistry, and then finally physics. I had the most throughout my entire high school. And since there was no middle school, it was really like 5 years of chemistry, 5 years of physics, and 5 years of math. And right, that puts physics neither first nor last. It's really throughout. At MIT right now in the engineering department, they started a very interesting program called NEET, N-E-E-T, with new engineering education transformation, where the idea is to really break down the boundaries between disciplines completely, since most engineering problems are truly multidisciplinary. Right? Designing an airplane, for example, is not just aeronautics, it's mechanics, it's materials, it's biology, it's physics, it's everything. And therefore, rather than centering their education on disciplines, they've centered it on problems and projects. Students choose a project that they like, and then they pull in the knowledge from whatever discipline is needed in order to solve that problem. So the content becomes secondary. It's really the project that I think that makes so much sense in the 21st century, because all the problems we face are multidisciplinary problems. They are not biology problems or physics problems or public health problems or anything. It's a combination of all of them. and for people to be able to draw on knowledge that's necessary to solve a problem, I think is absolutely crucial. So I think this is a very important discussion to have. Tom, you're next in line.
Thank you. Just had a more of just trying to gauge your opinion on this, but so we teach physics as 11th and 12th graders at my high school. And I was just, your thoughts on removing like the language that goes before the physics word. So instead of it being an honors physics course or a standard physics course, could we just teach courses called physics to 11th and 12th graders? Because what happens is by the time we get these 11th and 12th graders, we get 28 students taking an honors class, and we get 10 students taking a standard class. And there's, it just makes it very difficult to teach a class with 10 students and then a class with 28 students when we could probably just intermingle the students. Thank you.
Boy, have I, thank you so much, Tom. I have been in that situation before. I am kind of wondering if Melissa would have anything to say, since she's in a district now who just successfully is doing physics with 9th graders. And she also has been leading computational modeling in physics first workshops for teachers, which people can certainly apply for one of those workshops, which are being sponsored by AAPT this summer, I think. But Melissa, have you had experience with that idea of removing those qualifiers before the physics?
Yeah, and actually I was just typing in the chat because my previous school district, I saw this massive problem because of that. The students didn't want to take physics because it didn't have the honors in front of it. And so we really had to advocate directly. That was a direct to parents, that just because the class doesn't have an honors in front of it does not mean that it's not a rigorous course, does not mean that your honors child could not benefit from this course. As part of the advocacy within that district, we actually had 4 physics courses running at one time. So we had a conceptual class that truly I had built for special education students. We had a physics course, nothing in front of it. Little did they know these were sophomores through seniors that were actually working through physics first curriculum, because I was developing at the time, and so that made sense to me. And then we did have an honors course and an AP course. And I always approach my teaching that I'm always doing some sort of research in the background. So I always kind of collecting some data on students, but it was interesting to see who signed up for the honors course. It was, again, those kids whose parents felt their children needed that honors in front of it. But there's a massive benefit from having those students who can kind of transcend that boundary and get away from the need to have honors in front of their course name and participate in a course with students that they may not be in the other honors courses with. Those kids that get into those honors in AP, they seem to be stuck with the same students class after class, day after day. They get to be this group. And so having a truly rich discussion in class with students who don't have classes together all day long was extremely beneficial. And what I found and what I was able to show administration is that these students were making even bigger gains on tests like the FCI. So there is a huge benefit for removing that name in front of it, that qualifier that makes it standard or general or honors. But it does require collecting some data to show administrators why this is important. These students were making bigger gains in a physics course with no qualifier than the students who had decided to take the honors course. So I would encourage you, if you want to do that, start collecting some data. Data has always been a great way to get administrators to come around to my way of thinking.
Thank you, Melissa, and thank you, Tom. I see Jane Jackson, so good to see you. Thank you for joining. What a treat to have you here. You're next in line. Please introduce yourself because there's some people might not know you.
Okay, I'm Jane Jackson. I've been co-director of the Arizona State University Modeling Instruction Program for 26 years after teaching physics for 18 years at post-secondary level. I've done a lot of research on Arizona teachers, physics teachers, and to try to, because I love physics, and I want everybody to take physics. But some things that haven't been mentioned that you can read about if you go to modeling.asu.edu, our website, scroll down to the bottom, I'll put it in the chat, is number one, there's quite a lot of research that you can give to your school principal, counselors, and superintendent to educate them as to the importance of physics. There's quite a lot of research been done to show that high school physics is absolutely essential for STEM careers and majoring in STEM in college. And people are ignorant of this. For example, the ACT policy platform has, national data, and they have found, I'm going to read it, students who take the ACT recommended core curriculum, including rigorous physics in high school, achieve higher ACT scores than those who do not. Compared to graduates who do not take the core curriculum, graduates who take the core curriculum earn composite ACT scores that are on average 3 points higher. The graduates who take the core curriculum including physics, are more likely to be ready for workforce training programs. So it's college and career. This is powerful evidence that nobody seems to be bothering with at all. They're probably not aware of it at all. I'm talking about superintendents and principals. Another is this issue of equity. Mike Vargas has been very strong on equity. Your zip code determines whether you can take physics or not. This is true nationwide. And there's powerful evidence here too from the National Alliance of Black School Educators. They've got a position statement stating position is a gateway course for post-secondary study in science, medicine, and engineering, as well as an essential component in the formation of student scientific literacy. And they go on, they have this long explanation, this long paragraph. Principals, superintendents need to know this. They don't know it though. And we can, as a group, can publicize this. We should. One more thing too, while I've got the platform. A group of undergraduates at the College of New Jersey did research on middle school kids. And they found that middle school kids do not know what physics is. Therefore, they have no incentive to take physics in high school. Larry Dukerich and Earl Barrett, retired physics teachers in Arizona, I got them a Boeing grant, for $10,000, and they surveyed. They worked for the Arizona Department of Education and surveyed the counselors in Arizona, and also about almost 900 chemistry students, high school chemistry students in Arizona. What they learned is the chemistry students do not know what physics is. Therefore, they have no incentive to take physics after their chemistry course. Did you know that? Did you all know that kids don't not know what physics is? Therefore, they're not taking it. So that's another thing we can do. Middle school and kids, and of course, every physics teacher you should sell your physics course by going to the chemistry classroom, in November or October and talking it up, so forth. But so these are two points that we can definitely work on.
I would like to take this opportunity, I'm so glad Jane mentioned it, to bring in another one of our panelists to comment, and that would be Nicole Spencer, who is a former middle school teacher who now is a STEM coordinator at a community college. And Nicole, I'm wondering if you can say anything about, reaching out to the middle school teachers and middle school level.
Absolutely. So a few things that actually came to mind with that. Jane provided some powerful data. And I'll just share that I often used in our meetings with, administrators and policymakers at the state and national level, our personal stories and how powerful that was. So I'll start by just saying that my personal story is that I did not take high school physics. I knew I wanted to be a science teacher. So, I was a little unconfident and uneasy in teaching physics concepts to middle school teachers. And so once I, connected with STEMteachersPHX and I did my graduate degree, that's the first time I took a physics course, was in my graduate degree. And so with that, I understood how important and how powerful physics is. And so I, as a middle school teacher, always encouraged my students because I felt like I was not told. I didn't know what physics was when I was in middle school and high school as a student myself. I didn't understand the importance of it. I didn't know what physics was as even a major. I had no idea what you could do with that as a degree. So I used my ability to tell my students in middle school, please take physics. And then they would come back and visit me in middle school and say, hi, miss, well, we don't have a physics teacher. So physics isn't even an option at high school. And so that was an issue. And that's what led me to get involved with the Cactus Caucus in this group in advocating for physics teachers. So really that pipeline, and I'm able to see that now. And what I do at the college, the community colleges, we do a ton of STEM outreach. And I am so fortunate to be in this position because I can really push now that our activities are physical science based. Before it was very heavy in bio, which bio is awesome, but we know that there's such a shortage with physics. And so one is I'm able to connect teachers, with our outreach, engaging them in these physics activities, and then having those conversations with these middle school teachers about physics and resources for them. I would say that a lot of them are hungry for that information because themselves are not confident in teaching some of these physical science concepts to their students. And then one other thing I would add is APS has the Step Up Physics curriculum. And with that, they have a careers in physics, a women in physics, and everyday actions that they do. This is all free, so I highly encourage you to check it out. But we do professional development for high school teachers on getting them to engage their students in physics. And I've done it in middle school classrooms. I've actually gone, even though I'm at the college, I'll go to a middle school teacher's classroom and help do this lesson on teaching middle school students on what physics is and careers in physics, especially if, I'm not sure if you're familiar with like AVID, advancement via individual determination. So at those schools, we have a few schools that are Title I, low income, and they're part of the AVID program. So they're trying to get their students at a very young age to understand what college is and how to build those skills. So I, use that as a prime opportunity to reach out to the younger K-8 grades and explain what physics is. And you can be a doctor and you don't have to major in biology, you can major in physics. So just another way to spread awareness and connect with teachers that are not just in high school or college physics.
Thank you so much, Nicole. That was wonderful, and thank you, Jane, for mentioning all the great work done, and also for joining. We have only 4 minutes left. It's amazing how time flies when you're having fun. And there was still one hand up. Yes, Helen Reynolds. But before I turn it over to Helen for a short question and a short answer, I put in the chat a question I would like to have all panelists answer. You know, what advice do you have for our network? I mean, how can we join forces to advocate for high school physics? I meant to make that sort of a closing panel discussion, but we ran out of time with all the questions that were asked, which is a good thing. But still, I think this is an important question. If you have any advice for us, that would be fabulous. The other thing I want to mention before I turn it over to Helen for the final question is that on April 24th, Saturday, April 24th, same time, we'll hear a different set of voices at our Saturday meeting, namely that of high school students. So we have a panel of students, and each will record a short video beforehand that can be watched and commented upon, and they will form a panel that will present to this network. So I hope you will all join us on that Saturday. So April 24th at 11. And we'll make sure that everybody who signed on today is on the mailing list. I'm turning it over now in closing to Helen.
Okay, I'm from England. I'm super interested and excited by this because I have worked for quite a number of years with the Institute of Physics. And I think the thing that strikes me is to have a common thing that we're trying to achieve, both in terms of why we believe everybody should do physics. Are we all clear what that is, what we're trying to achieve, and why that is important? So what I'm hearing is lots of mixed, since I arrived in the States, lots of mixed things about conceptual, and I think get rid of all those qualifiers, have physics, and decide what that means and why we want everybody to be involved in that. That's a clear thing that I think is a starting point. Then we can advocate for that by talking to people at all levels in all places. But to come from a clear viewpoint would be the most important thing. And the second most important thing is this thing that we just discussed about middle school. How do we get more people in middle school science? I teach middle school and high school and AP, and I love the fact that I can do the progression. The middle school teachers see this lesson as coming from somewhere and going somewhere in terms of physics. That's the big thing, because then students will latch onto it and they will then want to go further with it. So sorry, it's not really a question, but the question I suppose is, how do we come to a common marketable statement about what we're doing and why? Because that's the thing that makes a difference to people who don't have much time and don't have the background.
Thank you for your question, Helen. And I have to say, I think you compiled that spreadsheet of simulations for physics that I've been using all year. So thank you very much. I think that was you. So I'm a fan. I would say that coming up with a common message is a good idea, but also can be problematic in that the message needs to be refined depending on your audience. And one thing the Cactus Caucus did was we were part of a policy fellowship where we were in a 10-week program, or 10-day program, I'm sorry, in DC, where we refined what we called our one-pager, which was our pitch to the Arizona legislature for why they should fund more scholarships and be concerned about the high school physics teacher shortage. And as part of that policy fellowship, we got to present our one-pager to a variety of different audiences. We went to the Department of Education, we went to the National Science Foundation, and we had what we're called, it's a critical friends protocol to sort of refine our message. And so we targeted towards the state of Arizona. And we considered a lot of things, even down to the minutia of, we don't want to have just blue or just red in our text because we might be speaking to a Republican or a Democrat, and we want to be very balanced. So I think having that kind of thing for maybe the teachers in this network, where you had a critical friends thing and could bounce your ideas off each other and hone your one-pager presentation, might be a good way to start, because it does have to target who you are talking to. Our message to the Arizona legislators had to be very different than maybe our message when we visited our congresspeople on the Hill. So I think that's one thing to consider. And I know we're over time now, so I'll defer to Eric now with final thoughts, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Kelly, Amanda, Mike, Melissa, Nicole, and Jeff. This was just fabulous. I think we could easily go on for another hour. But I want to honor everybody's schedule and your generosity in time. You know, one maybe final thought is this, and you mentioned it in your talk, Kelly. You said the importance of science in elementary school, and we went from talking about high school physics to middle school science education. But I think I fully agree with you. We should start much earlier. I mean, physics, after all, is a way of thinking, and one that, you know, since science and technology, in a certain sense, dominates our lives, we should expect the average, you know, member of society, citizen, to be educated about science the same way you're educated about language, and you only need to look at young kids to see that, to some degree, we're all born scientists. We're naturally curious. We have this natural desire to want to understand, which is why kids do nothing else but ask why. And unfortunately, it gets beaten out of them by not just by educators, but I think by parents too. Stop asking why, stop being curious. So maybe promoting curiosity in elementary schools is a necessary condition for better middle school, and finally better high school, and all the way at the end, better college physics instruction. So I found that a tantalizing thought that you placed there in your talk. Well, unfortunately, we're running out of time, which is a good thing. I hope that all those of you for whom this was the first PoLS talk, you'll consider joining us again. In the future. We will certainly keep you informed. We also have a Slack space where we continue some of these discussions. So if you're interested in joining that, let us know. And thank you again, Kelly and your colleagues, for joining us. This was absolutely marvelous. Have a wonderful weekend and hope to see you in the future again. Bye.